Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make an oil change on a 2011 Nissan Xterra with a 4-liter V6 engine. And I'm going to switch from the stock Nissan filter, which is probably not a very good one, to a K&N HP 1010 filter. I'm going to use Nissan original drain washers. You're going to need a torque wrench, a marker, some 1-inch wrenches. I add an additive called Cam Guard in. We found out on the freeway we get 24 miles to a gallon, 24 to 26. I don't know if it has anything to do with that or not, but we get 18 in the city. Both those mileages are above what Nissan specs. So again, not sure if that does anything or not. I put 1/5 of a bottle in that each oil change. I have here some low strength Loctite, and I have 6 quarts of oil. I'm going to put in 5 quarts first, see how much I need to add, and then top it up with that. I have my metric sockets, a couple of different types of oil filter wrenches or strap wrenches, my drain pan, and a funnel. And we're going to do this with making no spills whatsoever, and I'll show you how to do it. First thing you want to do is you want to put a towel down in front of the vehicle. You want to have the hood open so you can get to it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to show you how to do that. There's a little access panel underneath there. We're going to take a couple of bolts loose, take that panel off, set it aside, and then we'll have access to the oil filter. And the hardest part on this whole job is getting the oil filter out without making a big mess, because Nissan made a little drip system and it doesn't work very well. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. Okay, I'm going to remove this panel here, which allows access to the oil filter. Alternatively, you could probably remove this whole skid plate, but I don't think that's necessary. So I'm going to use an 8mm wrench, metric wrench, and take these loose, and then I will pull the panel out. It'll come out sort of forward. So I'll do that, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, what we're going to do, I have this access panel off, and I'm going to remove that filter. And when you remove the filter, some oil drips out, and it drips down this little chute here, which is really clever of Nissan to do. It's perfect. Except that it tends to start dripping down onto this piece here, and then it drips down into here. And they made actually a little flow system for it to flow out the back, but it doesn't seem to work very well at all, and it ends up usually making a big mess. So I'm going to stuff some paper towels in here, and I'm going to make a little device in order to catch the oil, and then that way I can capture it all without making a mess. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use an oil filter wrench to loosen the filter. I'm just going to barely loosen it so that I can easily turn it by hand. So I'll do that next. I have a half-gallon milk container here I'm going to cut up and use as a sluice for my oil to come off that oil filter. So I'm going to cut it like this, and then, oh, has a little water in it where it got rinsed out. I'm going to cut it down like this. And I'm going to be able to put this up into the, through the access panel to catch oil. I've inserted the piece of the milk carton up in to where the portion like a sluice that comes down where the oil drips out of the bottom of the filter will be the lip of the plastic goes underneath that, so that that oil, when I take the filter loose, will go into this plastic. I have the lids secured tightly so it'll catch up all the oil that comes out and make it hopefully drip free and very easy to clean up. So I'm going to loosen the filter now and let the oil drip out, and then we'll see how it does. Okay, so I've loosened the filter. I've caught most of the oil here. Looks like my invention may need a little tweaking because some oil did escape and it's dripping here. I'm catching it right here in this pan, the one that I took off from the access flap. So I'm going to let it drip for a minute, and then I'm going to remove all this, remove the filter, clean up any mess, and hopefully there won't be anything on the floor when I get done, and it'll be nice and neat. So I'm going to do that next, and then I'll show you how to install the new filter. Okay, so I have my new filter right here, and I have a marker, and the first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of oil and put it around this gasket here. So I'm just going to reach into the oil pan down here and get about a drop and put it on here. And the instructions are to screw it on hand tight and then turn it on 3/4 of a turn. So to find 3/4 of a turn, after I install this, I'm going to put a mark either here or down here, and that's going to tell me where my base location is, and then I'll turn it 3/4 of a turn, and that mark will go around 3/4, and that way I'll know I've tightened it up to what K&N recommends. So I'm going to go ahead and install it now, then I'm going to mark it, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I installed my K&N filter right up in here, and I hand tightened it, and I put a black magic marker mark on it so I'll know when I've turned it 3/4 of a turn. So what I'm going to do now is get a 1-inch wrench, go up in there and turn it 3/4 of a turn, and then I'll finish cleaning up in here. I'll put the plate back on, and this part will be finished, and then we'll drain the oil out of the main drain pan. The filter, it's installed now and fully tightened up 3/4 of a turn past hand tighten. Actually, it's 3/4 of a turn past where it just starts to meet and grip on the surface of the oil filter housing. And so it's tight now, and I've cleaned up in this area here, and I'm ready to install this cover back on here. So it's just going to go like this, and then I'm going to put the 2 bolts in that hold it in place. And I like to put a little bit of low strength Loctite on them. And all that does is really act as a thread lubricant, and it just keeps them from backing out. You don't have to over torque them or anything when you do it that way. So I'm going to get them started here. And then I'm going to snug them up. I don't have a torque setting for it, but you don't want to put them too tight. You definitely always want to start your bolts by hand to make sure they're not cross-threaded. So these particular ones, I believe, have a nylon stop on the back. In other words, a nylock, so that it keeps the bolts from backing out on their own. Whoops. So I'm just turning that till it's snug. I'm going to do the other side. And next thing I'm going to do is actually drain the oil out of the oil pan. So I'll show you that next. This here is the drain plug for the drain pan. This is the drain pan. And I'm going to use my torque wrench to loosen the plug. I can tell the dealer when they changed the oil, made it a little bit too tight. Probably didn't use a torque wrench. Yeah. Wow. Probably torqued it down to like, 100 foot-pounds or something. That's really the reason you don't really want to take crap to the dealer, because you never know what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm trying to get it to where I can finger loosen it. I have my drain pan underneath it. And I still can't finger loosen it, which is making me a bit concerned, because maybe they stripped out my drain plug at the dealership. Wouldn't be the first thing they've done wrong. I typically do all my own service and don't take it to the dealer, but since this is a new truck under warranty, I took it there a couple times. Wasn't too pleased with the performance. Okay, so here comes the beautiful oil. I'm going to let that drain completely out. To help it to drain, I'm going to remove the oil filler cap on the top of the engine, and that'll help make the oil come out faster and complete. Also, the oil is warm. I did drive the truck around for a little while, and so while that's draining, I'm going to take this drain plug, clean it up, and replace the drain plug gasket with a new one. And that way, when I'm finished here, I'll be able to install it, torque it to 29 foot-pounds, which is what the manual says. I think it's 22 to 29 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go 29 foot-pounds of torque, and it should be good to go after that. Refill it with oil, and I'll show you what to do next. I've installed the new drain plug gasket. I'm not sure which way it goes, flipped this way or the other way, but either way, it's going to get smashed down and flattened out. And it does have a little notch on it that allows it to thread down, but it can thread either way. So I'm going to do it this way. The one I took off was so smashed down I couldn't tell. I'm sure the dealer probably doesn't pay any attention to it anyway. We looked on the internet not much information. So I'm going to put some of this 3-bond sealer on here. I get this from Japan. They use it all over Japan for everything. Anything that's bolt to a bolt assembly gets this 3-bond. I have no idea where to buy it in the US. It's a low strength, like Loctite, just low strength. And I can't read kanji, so I can't tell you anything more about it than that. I've had this bottle for about 5 years. I use it all the time. I still have plenty left. Okay, so I'm going to install the drain plug with a 14mm wrench and just get it started to be snug. And then I'll use my torque wrench to torque it up. Okay, drain plug. I've started hand threading it. Again, you always want to hand thread so that you make sure you don't cross thread something. Just going to finger tighten it there. Put on my box end wrench. Start to snug it down. And again, the torque setting is somewhere around 22 to 29 foot-pounds. I have one of those good click stop wrenches, so I'm going to set it to 29. I've already set it there. I just have to put the socket on it. Doing this underneath the car is not always the easiest unless you have a lift. So I'm going to put the torque wrench on there. And then you have to use the handle end to make sure you get the right torque. So I'm going to start to turn it here until I feel it pop. The torque wrench will pop. And there we go. That's 29 foot-pounds. So now I'm ready to put my oil in, and then we'll go from there. This is the oil cap. It goes right here at the filler. It goes on top of that area. So I took it loose here, and I'm going to just wipe it off with a paper towel real quick. Set it aside. Wipe this off. And I definitely want to wipe out my funnel before I put new oil in. Even though I keep my funnel clean, I want to make sure it doesn't have any contaminants or debris in it. And I've cut that funnel to fits all my vehicles for some reason. And I'll put my paper towel there in case I accidentally spill a little bit. So I'm going to start out putting 5 quarts of, in this case I'm using full synthetic Castrol edged titanium 5W30. And the top doesn't want to come off of it. And these come with that little foil sealer on top. So I'm just going to use a key to perforate that hole and pull that foil back so I can pour the oil. And I want to very slowly start to pour the oil. And I'm going to put 5 quarts in there to start with. I'll run it and I'll check the oil level. Also, after I put the 5 quarts in, I'm going to put 1/5 of a bottle of the cam guard in. I used to use STP oil treatment. I switched to cam guard recently. Don't know if there's any difference or if any of them do anything special. All I'm trying to do is prevent wear on my engines. I have put over 500,000 miles on a Mercedes, and we have a 97 4Runner that's got high mileage on it, doesn't smoke, always passes the pollution test. So I do believe if you change your oil frequently and do a good job of it and use synthetic oil and maybe some of the additives that are on the market, I think it does extend the life of the engine. I'm going to add about 1/5 of a bottle of cam guard. I found out about this from the aircraft industry. They use a sister product on aircraft, on piston type aircraft. So I said, hey, if it's good enough for aircraft and it passes spec on that, then I'll go ahead and start using it on my engine. So I just add about 1/5 of a bottle, just pour a little bit in there, not a whole lot. That's probably plenty. And I can get 5 or 6 oil changes out of one of these bottles. So I'm going to put the oil cap back on and start the engine, and then I'll recheck the oil level, and I'll check for leaks also. You want to definitely check for leaks to make sure you don't have any issues. I've added 5 quarts of oil, ran the engine, checked for leaks, no leaks to be found. I have to admit, we did spill a couple of drops of oil while we were doing this oil change, but really not too much. And given the fact that last time I took it to the dealer and had this done, I got it home and it was dripping oil when I got in the driveway, and the dealer had forgotten to tighten the oil filter. So it was barely hand tight. It was loose and leaking oil, dripping. So I just don't even want to mess with the dealers because of that type of issue. And so I'd rather just do the work myself again, as I've mentioned. So I'm pouring this into the old container, and I'm going to take it down for waste recycle. So what I'll do is after I pour it all in here, I'm going to mark the container with recycle oil and then take it down and recycle it. I've put 5 quarts of waste oil in here now, so I'm going to mark it recycle and take it down to my recycling center. Of course, if you buy it at Walmart, you can take it to their recycle center, and that's where I buy my oil, but I just take it down to our city recycle. See Walmart, you can take it to there for the used oil. Now I still have a little bit of oil left, so I know I'm going to need to add a little bit of oil. So I'm going to let it sit for just a minute. I'm going to recheck my oil level, and then I have 1 more quart of oil, and I'll start to add a little bit until I reach the upper oil level mark, and then I'll know I've put in enough, and then I will recycle all used oil. Okay, the oil dipstick is right here. This is where we're going to check the oil. They put it in a very weird position. It's kind of a bent angle, so it's a little difficult to get out. So I'm going to take it out, wipe it off with a clean paper towel, and I'm going to reinsert it and see if I can see what my level is and how much I might need to add. Getting this in is very tricky. You sort of have to wiggle it around different directions to get it to go in. But you can. So I insert it fully, take it back out, and I'll see what my oil level is. So according to this, it's not quite full. It's between the full and low mark. So I'm going to add about 1/2 quart of oil and see what that does. So I'll do that next. That'll be 5.5 quarts total on this oil change, and we'll see how that works out. Okay, in closing, make sure that when you're completed with this job that you have the oil filter cap on nice and snug. Make sure that the dipstick is fully seated. And on this, I actually used exactly 5 3/4 quarts of oil with a K&N filter change. And I was very careful, just add a little bit of oil and recheck because you don't want to overfill it. So that's what we have, and thanks for watching.